gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the ATACS podcast. I am your host today. I am Flex. Today we are talking about, it is February 11th, 2021. Almost forgot the date. Today we are talking about the video game Paradise Killer. And I should say up front that this is a no-holds-barred discussion. There will be spoilers all up and down this podcast, so if you do not wish to be spoiled, you should probably leave now. As I mentioned, I am Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. This is a two-man show today, and my partner is Mr. Nate from Clayton, North Carolina. How's it going, Nate?
Hello. Doing fine.
The rest of the ATACS crew is apparently too cool for Paradise Killer, so we are going to hold it down.
Or not cool enough, you know.
It all depends on your perspective.
We'll leave it up to the viewers.
It's open to interpretation. But yeah, we both played this game. I played it towards the end of 2020, and you finished it, a month ago or so? Maybe a little more?
Yeah, I finished it sometime around the turn of the year. I don't remember the exact time frame, but yeah.
Yeah, but here we are in early February recording this podcast, and we both, I think, fair to say, found it to be a very interesting and compelling game, a very unique game in many ways as well. So we're going to talk about it. I think the first thing I want to talk about is just kind of, our experience playing it. But I guess to set it up, also, I'm going to turn it over to our lore expert, Nate.
That's me.
You just kind of want to maybe maybe give us a little bit of kind of just a very broad setup of this world and, I guess leading into how we as players interact with this world.
Yeah. So it is a very strange world, and it is not, let's say, perfectly clear through the game exactly what the deal with this world is, but the gist that I put together through my time playing was that this is an alternate reality of Earth where there were at some point in history very directly involved gods in the world, and humanity rebelled against those gods and killed them or exiled them or trapped them in prison in pyramids. And this is all just lore backstory that you kind of can put together throughout the game, but it does kind of matter. And the main characters of this game are a group called the Syndicate, who are Immortal ? People. They're not gods, but are powerful and important in some way. And they are on a mission, an eternal mission, it seems, to create paradise. And so they use their semi-godlike powers to create islands, create basically pocket realities is kind of how I thought about it, where they literally architect paradise, or their best attempt at a perfect world where they can exist forever. And their other goal along with that is to resurrect or return the dead or exiled gods to power in some way.
Yeah,
they serve them, maybe? I'm not 100% sure about that part.
Yeah, this all seems to still be in service of some kind of higher power, gods, whatever.
Yeah. There's definitely Syndicate members and groups who are we shouldn't even be playing around with these islands. We just got to get our bosses back, kind of deal.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It has a lot of mythology building sprinkled around the game world that you kind of piece together over time. all of these characters have long histories with each other and the world because they're all immortal and very important. And so like that stuff is meaningful and important to the game, even if like the details of who the gods are and what they do and why they were killed or how those details don't really matter. But like, yeah, the general concept of these immortal beings in service of absent gods trying to craft paradise is the setup of the game.
Yeah. And I guess the main thing that like I don't even know that I got a great sense of like what quote unquote paradise means to them. I do know that demonic corruption is a big part of the failed islands.
Yeah, so their main goal, I believe, is to craft an eternal, perfect paradise that won't crumble due to demonic incursion, and generate power basically enough to free their gods. And the way they do that is pretty messed up, which is enslaving a bunch of mortals and bringing them to the island and basically forcing them to pray to generate whatever cosmic mythic energy will help them free the gods. So as you start sort of piecing all that stuff together, you realize like, oh, all of these characters in this game, probably including the person you're playing, are just bad. They're not good. Their whole thing is like enslave mortals, work them to their death, get a new batch in here. Who cares?
Yeah.
We need to craft paradise and save our immortal evil gods who were killed by humanity at some point.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting parts of this game to me is all the individual characters' motivations and all this. And like you said, there's an argument to be made that none of the primary players are good.
Yeah, they're all bad. They're all terrible.
Yeah. So I definitely want to get into just like talking about the characters and their motivations, but maybe save that a little bit for later.
So the actual thing that starts off the game, the actual event, the catalyst, is that the lead members of the Syndicate are murdered. And so this game is a murder mystery conspiracy story of you as the investigator for this immortal group trying to figure out who done it.
Yep.
And so that's where you get all the character work and the like trying to figure out motivations and things like that.
Yeah. So then the structure of the game is, you are playing detective, and because all of the characters kind of have a role on the island, and the character you're playing as, Lady Love Dies.
Great names. Just
great
top-notch namings.
And we didn't really talk about kind of the style of this game. We'll probably get along, touch on that as we go. But this game has a vibe. Let's say
it has a vibe. It has a tone. It has a color palette, and it knows what it is, and it's super cool about it. It's like swanky, like vibrant, tropical colors, and characters named Lady Love Dies, and like cool jazzy music.
Yeah, the soundtrack also great. One of my favorite character names is probably Dr. Doom Jazz.
Yeah,
rolls right off the tongue. But so you come in as this investigator, and Lady Love Dies has been kind of expelled.
She was exiled. Yeah,
exiled for hundreds, thousands, I don't know, a long time, a large number of years.
I feel like they say, and I want to say it was like 3,000 years, but I could have that number wrong.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do say. There's a lot of these details that I'm going to forget.
They aren't that important.
Yeah. All you really need to know is it's been a while. So the point is that there are pieces of history that your character is not aware of because she has been
Yes.
gone for a long time. That's the important part.
So they've had a couple of failed islands since she was exiled. I think a couple of the main characters have come into the Syndicate since she was exiled. So there's a few characters she hasn't ever met. She has a history with a lot of them that you kind of uncover through conversations with them. It's a good group dynamic. This game has a really strong like ensemble cast that are all linked together in interesting ways.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what was the most interesting to me. Like, the lore and setup stuff is it's really bizarre and kooky in a way.
It's fun and stupid, and they lean into it in ways that I really like. But yeah, that's not the draw of the game.
Yeah, and it is worth stressing that I really like how they embrace the ridiculousness of all of their lore. Like, they could have done all that in a really annoying, like, grating way, but I think the way they just embraced it in its ridiculousness just made it entertaining.
For sure.
But yeah, the real meat of the narrative is the cast of characters to me, and how all their relationships and motivations intertwine. But you, as the investigator, as Lady Love Dies, you kind of set out on this island, which is kind of presented as like an open world in a way. Like, you start the game basically talking to the judge, and the judge has brought you in, which the judge is also a funny character to me.
Yeah. Judge is just named Judge, and they're like physically like intertwined with the material structure of the island in a way where they're just like this kind of like horrifying, like, body horror blob person like sticking out of the ground. And they're just like, look, Lady Love Dies, you got to do this.
Yeah, because they have like 4 or 6 arms or something, and just look. Yeah, I don't know. But it's also like they're kind of a weird mix. Like, their personalities they're this weird mix between being robotic, but then also gets weirdly excited about certain things, and like is like very invested in the process, but also is like seems to be genuinely interested in the mystery as well. So it's a weird character. But they bring. Yeah, the judge brings you on board and basically, gives you the layout and is like, hey, you're the official investigator here. No one else, like, all the important people that could make decisions to override you are dead. So, like, you're basically the only person that, like, we don't have a choice to trust anyone but you to make the decisions and the judgments. So, like, it's presented. Point being is, it presents pretty early on to you that, hey, you're the investigator. Your word is basically law here. So whatever conclusions you come to in this investigation is going to stand, whether they are right or wrong. So you're kind of given carte blanche right at the beginning that, like, hey, whatever you say goes.
And it's funny how often in conversations with other characters, they'll like be hesitant to tell you something or give you something, and you're just like, dude, I'm the investigator. And they're like, oh, crap, you're right. Like, you have so much inherent power, but you also do step into this island where the actual leadership has all been murdered, and there's like this weird power vacuum dynamic where Judge seems to have a lot of inherent power and brings you in, and the investigator has a lot of inherent power, but then there's the architect character, Carmelina Silence, who's kind of assumed the leader role in the place of the murdered people. So there's like already, the second you hit the ground, it's like, who's really in charge here? Nobody really knows.
Yeah. The judge seems to have the kind of the final word, in the sense that, like, Judge, like you said, seems to somehow be like a part of the island in a weird way. So they seem to be able to just, like, at will, like, lock things and, like, just make these physical things happen. But yeah, you come out of your meeting with Judge, and it's like, here's this island, solve the mystery. And like, they don't, like, you get this, before that point, you get this Starlight computer that is like kind of like, it helps you keep track of information and stuff, and has a really crappy map in it you can look at.
You also
but
need
like,
Shinji
other than that,
before you go to the island.
Yes, we will certainly talk about Shinji. But yeah, you kind of step out. Best character of 2020.
Yep.
But yeah, you kind of step out on the island, and it's like, go, like, they really don't point you anywhere at that point. It's like, investigate, just go. So I guess my first question to you is, like, when you first stepped out of that conversation with Judge and kind of have no direction, like, what was your first thought? Like, were you kind of confused, overwhelmed, or were you just like, were you like, I'm ready to go, this is great? Like, what were you, I don't know, where was your headspace at that moment?
Yeah, I was definitely confused about what I could do and what the parameters of the game. Like, literally, I had seen some buzz about this game. I had seen that you played it, and you said you thought I would enjoy it. So I was like, all right, I'll just jump in. I literally not ever seen any video of the game. I think I had seen maybe some character art or something.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I just jumped into this thing and go down to this island, and Judge is like, you got to figure this thing out. And then I was like, all right, cool. Step outside, and yeah, it's basically just a first person 3D open world game / adventure game. It's like a 3D platformer, like a big Mario 64 level, but also an adventure game and first person. It's basically like the gameplay structure of Paradise Killer.
Sure, yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I guess I'll just walk towards one of these markers I have on my UI. So it gives you like a button you can press to see where all the characters are at any time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I'll just pick the closest one to me and go to that and see what happens. And that took me to Carmelina Silence, the architect, who's one of the pretty important characters. I mean, all the characters are important, but she's assumed a position of political power on the island and has very direct connection to what's going on.
Yeah. Like, she's like, in some ways they're supposed to be, I think, kind of a flatter structure, but definitely I would say Carmelina and maybe Witness are like the two who have kind of risen up in this vacuum.
Yeah, for sure. And so I definitely went to her first and just kind of talked through her dialogue tree, because every time you talk to somebody, especially the first time, it gives you a bunch of stuff to like just question them about their alibi, possible motives. You get to know them a little bit. It just gives you a bunch of prompts in this dialogue system to start that. And every time you talk to somebody for the first time, you get your Starlight computer and its cool little robot voice say their name. So those are always fun.
Yeah.
Carmelina Silence.
Yeah.
So I think I did that, and then just kind of was like, I guess I just need to go around to talk to everybody, and kind of explore the island a little bit. So that was my basic path, was just like, go to the nearest person that I hadn't talked to yet, and just kind of look around and see what I saw, like bouncing around the island that way.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense and is very much not what I did.
So what did you do?
I did my explorer brain thing, which is...
You like pick one end of the island and start working your way across it or something?
Kind of, yeah, basically. Yeah. So take that thought and combine it with the like exploration thought of, oh, if this is the place I'm supposed to go, I'm going to explore everywhere else first to make sure I don't miss any secrets. So I forget exactly what happened, but like I was like poking at something like near that room where you pop out of with Judge, And this is a very vertical island, and like
Yes.
kind of tricky to navigate in some ways.
Yeah.
But I basically end up just falling from there all the way to the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and just end up on the beach and like near Dr. Doomjazz's boat.
Yep.
So I basically at that point was like, all right, well, I'm down at the bottom, so let me just explore this island from the bottom up.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I kind of just
It
like
probably
panned
takes a
around
long
the
time to
island.
just walk around the beach, though. It's probably a pretty
Yeah.
boring way
So,
to start.
yeah, so that's actually where I was leading into is like Dr. Doomjazz is down there. So I talked to him very early on,
He's like
but
the only
other,
character at that bottom level.
yep.
Yeah.
So I spent a good chunk of time just exploring the whole bottom level of the island and not really talking to anyone. So,
Just picking up blood gems and
yep, just getting those blood gems and but there's a few pieces of evidence down there. There's like a blade or
yeah.
something that fell and maybe a couple other things. So like I got a good chunk of things and got some of that island exploration on my belt, and then just kind of worked up from there. And like as I went up each layer, I just kind of circled around. The area that took forever were like all the apartments area. Like
yeah, that area is so dense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like when I once I left that kind of like lower level, that was where I went next. So it's like first I spent a lot of time where there weren't a lot of people, and then I went into this really dense apartment-y area and spent a lot of time. So like, yeah, I did a lot of just exploring, and that stuff does get tedious. Like I think probably the game's weakest points to me is just the tedium, and I don't really know how you fix this if you want to make it an open world, but just the tedium of the exploration got a little old, like a little too soon, I guess. Like it could have remained interesting for longer, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's just on better world design. I'm not sure. But yeah, like once I got through that apartment section, like once you do that bottom level and then the apartments, like that's probably actually a good percentage of the world. So like from there, things sped up.
Yeah.
Things sped up a lot. So like the pace of the game definitely picked up after that. And yeah, eventually got around to talking to everyone and everything. But I think one thing that my method did lead to is, I think because I was so exploratory, is I think I found a lot of evidence before talking to people. So I think I had a lot of interactions with people where like by the time I got to talking with them, I had already found some important pieces of evidence. So my initial conversations were even longer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas I spent probably a lot of time kind of ping-ponging back and forth between people, having, dozens of conversations with each character across the game, because I would find something and then be like, I got to go ask, Doomjazz about that. So, yeah, I probably had more overall conversations with each character because of that than you did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious how that played out in the long run. Like towards the back end, I had to do some of that ping-ponging, but I wonder if it was more efficient or not. One of the things, another thing that was, I guess, a little frustrating is they do kind of like gate some conversation things just behind. I think there were a couple that are just purely gated by like how many times you talk to someone. Because I think it was Carmelina, but there was someone who at the end I had completed all my conversations with everyone else, and there's one person left at the end. I'm pretty sure it was Carmelina, just for me, just the order I did things, and where like she had two or three more things of dialogue I had to get through that were just her. So I'd like go talk to her, exhaust her dialogue, and basically have to leave and then come back to trigger the next thing. So it's like, I think that what they want you to do is more like doing that ping-ponging around, but like depending on the order you do things, like it can kind of get imbalanced in a way.
Yeah, because every character that you interact with has just an option to just hang out with them, which usually just leads to like a very short more casual conversation, unless it's with Grand Marshal Akiko 14, who's just an asshole every time, no matter what.
we will get there.
And if every character, if you do those enough times, just the hangout option, then that unlocks like another conversation that you can have with them that is like relatively important to the case in some way. So they all have this kind of like not time locked secret conversation, but like you just have to have hung out with them enough times, and you can just do it over and over, which I didn't realize until the very end of the game.
Right.
But yeah, I think it is meant to encourage you to kind of do what I did and just go back and forth between everybody a bunch of times. But is maybe not, it's a little bit sloppy of a way to do that, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know what the best. I don't know what the other. I don't know what necessarily a better way to handle that kind of stuff is. Like that's always really tricky stuff.
The one way that caught me is that I wasn't hanging out with everybody every time I talked to them, because I was just like, oh, I don't like this character, so I'm not gonna hang out with them. Like I was like, I guess role playing a little bit, and then I got to later in the game, and I was like, oh crap, I need to be doing that with everybody.
So one thing we probably should have said up front is Judge makes it clear to you that you can come back whenever you feel ready and start the final trial. And they don't really give you any indication of like what is enough information to start the trial. So I guess I had this mindset of like, I want to exhaust everything and get as much information as possible. So I was always just kind of clicking on every option, even hanging out with people when I didn't feel like there was a need, but it was just like for the sake of completionist, I guess. Because I wanted to try and get everything. So in terms of exploring the island, I guess just like we don't need to walk through every little thing, of course, but I guess just kind of the broad questions are, did you enjoy exploring the island? B, how completionist were you, and do you feel like you found everything? And C, did anything stump you in your exploration? And
so in terms of just the general like moving around the island, it was fine. Early on, I definitely didn't mind it, especially. Well, you specifically told me to go find the movement upgrades, which there are 3 of, just randomly put around the island, and you just use this machine and you get these upgrades, and that's really silly. Once you have those, like moving around it is fine. You definitely get to the point like where you just want to start checking off those final boxes, and it's like, oh, I have to walk all the way across. Like you get so familiar with the island that it's not big. It doesn't take that long, but it just, I think it becomes just tedious enough after a while to be like, okay, I don't really want it. And you can fast travel, so like, they mitigate some of that by the island being it's very like, all the areas are very like, I don't know, I found them very easy to start to remember routes. I found things very visually distinctive. Like it doesn't look samey enough that I ever got turned around or lost. Like I always knew where I was going. So like I think they do a good job with a lot of that stuff.
I think in the way they make the island so dense is they're able to make it take a long time to explore when you're first going through, but when you're just trying to get from one place to another, it actually doesn't take that long.
Yeah. And you can fast travel, which is good, but the fast travel menu could be better. So you kind of have a better idea where you're going. Yeah. So it's a lot of like, it's fine, they do some smart things. Some parts could be better. It's pretty much where I land on all the like traversal stuff.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of, I guess part of this question I was thinking about is like, did you enjoy the act of like the mental act of like looking for stuff like clues or whatever? Like, do you think like that's a viable, enjoyable way to engage with that game? Like, I guess kind of did you enjoy that direction of this game of being an open world detective thing of like being like, oh, there could be clues somewhere here?
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed like combing each area and trying to look for routes I hadn't considered yet, or like, you know, finding little secret hidden nooks and whatever pickups were hidden back there. Because basically every square inch of that island has stuff in it to find. Like it's very, like you said, it's very dense. So I did enjoy that process.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have spent as much time as I did hunting for the gems and stuff that I didn't really need. If I didn't enjoy just kind of like combing through the areas.
Yeah. So how completionist were you? Which one of you mentioned the 3 movement or upgrades they give you. So one of them's a double jump. Another one's an air dash, which in my opinion, you should just start with these things because they make a world of difference in movement and they're easy to get early if you know where they are. But then the third one is basically just a collectible locator. Like it basically just shows you where all the collectibles are. So like it's pretty easy to be, I don't think it shows you where evidence is, but
no, it doesn't.
But it shows you like where the blood vials are mainly. And then I guess the like, I don't know what you'd call them, like the historical things or the art pieces or whatever those things.
Lore items and stuff like that. I was pretty completionist. I don't know 100% if I found everything in the game, but I definitely would like clear an area out at some point. I did a lot of like, you know, when I was moving between characters, having conversations, I would just stop in an area that I hadn't, you know, really explored and just like clear it out randomly whenever I felt like it. I didn't have any real method to it.
Did you use that meditate item thing? Okay.
Yeah.
I was also pretty completionist. I tend to be an explorer in games in general.
Right.
And actually I found the double jump and the dash pretty quickly, but for whatever reason, I guess just the route I took, I didn't find the meditate thing until like halfway through the game. So by then I had, I think, already found quite a bit of items anyway, but I did, like, as I would run through places, I would, you know, trigger that and try and pick up everything I had missed, which were usually blood vials.
Yes.
It's a lot of blood gem vials, whatever they are, which are your currency in the game.
Yes.
So yeah, and I don't even remember the third question I asked. Did anything stump you? So,
yes, I know I got stumped by some stuff or stuck on some stuff or wasn't sure how something worked. So like I had some really silly stumbling blocks early on with like for some reason I didn't figure out early on how the fast travel system worked, so I just basically didn't use it for most of the game. Like it didn't really matter, but I just didn't I just didn't realize how it worked. You have to there are save points everywhere, and if you spend blood crystals at a save point, you can unlock it as a fast travel point. And then I was like somehow missed how you actually access the fast travel menu. So I was just like, I'm just wasting crystals on these save points and I don't know how to actually use them. So I just stopped doing it. But eventually I went back through and did it. And then like these vending machines that you can buy drinks from. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, this seems pointless. I'm not gonna do that. And then like realized
You get
later that there's actually stuff you get from them.
Yeah,
It's
I forget what it
useful.
was, but yeah, if you got a certain number of them, you got something, and I don't remember what it was at
Yeah.
this point.
So your computer Starlight can get some upgrades.
Oh
And
yes.
one of them is in a vending machine that once
Yep.
you've bought enough things from the vending machine, like the the corporate robot for the vending machine company calls you and is like, "Hey, there's something jammed in this one vending machine. You should go get it."
Yeah, and then yeah, it's a Starlight upgrade. So I guess that's the other
Um,
thing that kind of gates you on the island is like you come across locked doors and
yeah,
you need these upgrades to get through certain
hack
doors.
them. Hmm.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of like gating that way, which of course the like more plot critical things are behind more intense
Yeah.
locks. So they do kind of guide. It's like it's open world, and in a way you can stumble across things in different orders, but they do kind of gate things that puts like a slight funneling to some of it where like you're more likely to see some things before other things. It's not
Hmm.
guaranteed, I don't think, but like if you just knew how to get all the Starlight upgrades, you could probably do that and see things
Yeah.
really out of order. But um,
Yeah, for sure.
I think
But yeah,
most
like
players would probably.
a couple of those little things tripped me up. And then like,
I guess I was wondering in terms of like the mystery itself,
yeah.
like
I think like in terms of unraveling the mystery, I feel like just collected a bunch of evidence and talked to everybody a few times, and then it all started to kind of come together where I was like starting to put together that there are two threads going alongside each other that seemed unrelated at some point in the mid game of my playthrough, and then just trying to like tease out which parts were on which side of that dual thread of
yeah,
the mystery. And then at the very end, there were like a couple of dangling like plot points in the Starlight computer that tracks your progress. Where I was just like, I have no idea where to look for these last couple of things.
yeah,
Like I knew what my answer was to the mystery at that point. Like I knew what had happened, and I just couldn't
yeah,
like check these last couple of boxes on the log. So I just
yeah.
looked those up.
Okay. And was it just like
Where to go?
something you needed to find, or what?
Yeah, it was just like I forget what one of them was. The one that
Or
really tripped me up, I just had to like go back somewhere. I think I had to just go back to the crime scene and like look at something again that I had
Mhm.
already inspected. And now that I had more evidence, like it would tick something or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so
think
there's just like little things like that would kind of trip me up throughout. But yeah, in terms of the overall like putting together the mystery, like that all came together pretty cleanly.
yeah. Um, and the main reason I was kind of asking is because like with this open world structure, like it seems like there's potential to like I don't know get twisted up in a weird way that like I don't know makes it harder to piece together. But I feel like
Hmm.
it came together pretty well for me as well. I mean, there were definitely things that like I'm not sure quite what happened here until like near the end when I had all the evidence. And I think one thing, and I don't know if this is for better or worse, or maybe it's just more neutral, but like the way Starlight kind of tracks everything is like I actually took an approach through most of the game of being like, I'm not even going to like read all this and try and put it together until I've basically found all the evidence and talked to everyone. So I
Yeah.
was like, Starlight is keeping track of everything. So I'm just going to focus on the actual exploration until the end. So I was just like, I wasn't even like trying to like problem solve anything and just
Hmm.
going around collecting it. And then once I did collect all the evidence, it's kind of just laid out in front of you at that point. Like there's
Yeah.
not really a lot of problem solving to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that they track and present the information that you find in a very direct way. and like you're able to tease out very quickly, like, okay, these things are true, these things are important, and like the lines are pretty direct in terms of like how things connect once you have everything. So I think it's only I think you could really only get yourself really mixed up or really twisted on the mystery if you were trying to jump to conclusions with a limited amount of information.
Yeah. Which I think is like simultaneously one of the most fascinating things about this game. And then also, if you are completionist, maybe a little bit of a bummer because there's not really much deduction, but maybe that's okay. I mean, maybe that's not really what the game's going for. Like the game's maybe more focused on just uncovering the story rather than trying to deduce it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think if they wanted it to be more like of a player-driven problem-solving exercise, they would have cut down on the amount of very clear information you could get before going to trial, and that trial portion would have been a much bigger part of the game. I think it's very clearly intended to be like, you can find the answer and then go solve it.
Yeah. But it is an interesting question of, I mean, both of us were fairly completionists, but there's definitely an interesting question of if you only find a subset of the evidence and information, then you do kind of have to piece together stuff mentally a little bit. And then when you go to the trial and present, you're kind of making accusations with limited information, and I'm kind of curious what that would look like, or like how confusing it would even be to try and make those accusations. I mean, I'm sure that depends on exactly what you find, but it's kind of an interesting thought experiment with this game is the way they let you just go trigger the trial at any time. And they kind of stress that a lot. It's like, I forget the wording they use, but they make a distinguish. They use the word truth a lot, and they distinguish that, like they contrast that with it was either facts or something. They have a lot of terminology around like the truth you present is the truth that becomes canon, whether that's actually factually what happened or not. It's like you are constructing your version of the truth.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is like, you can gather the facts, you can gather the evidence, but then you construct the truth. And since you're the investigator, the divine investigator of this weirdo immortal group, then like whatever you present is the truth.
Which is interesting. I think even if you have all the evidence, as it sounds like, you and I probably did, you can probably construct almost any narrative you want from that.
I think there's probably some limit to that, but you definitely have some leeway.
I mean, it becomes pretty clear what happened. So like you can present what I'm guessing you and I both did, kind of the actual events. But I mean, if you wanted to, I think you could present all sorts of other scenarios. I guess one more question before we start talking about the actual characters and their interweaving plot lines. Was there any, in the investigation portion, did you ever have any like moments that felt revelatory or like kind of a wow moment or anything of like, oh, this is big kind of moments? I think one for me, I guess I'll start off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I did kind of a bottom-up approach, like up on some mountain or hill, like near that museum or graveyard or whatever it is, like kind of on the top of that mountain. I think it was up there. I don't remember exactly where it was, but at some point you find the secret doors that Carmelina used.
Yeah,
to bounce
that's
around.
Definitely like the thing. Like if you didn't find that, character, there's a character hidden in this graveyard behind the opulent ziggurat.
There you go.
There's a character hidden. Dainu Nagate.
Okay.
and he is like if you didn't find him, I think it would be very hard to construct a coherent narrative about like tied together everything.
Yeah, especially for Carmelina's plotline. Like there were definitely, I
Yeah.
remember there were other parts like didn't she kill one of the people in the past that Henry Division got blamed for?
Yep.
So like you could find like that evidence and like other ways to accuse her, but in terms of the actual like syndicate murder, like without finding the secret hallways, I think would be hard to pin on her.
Yeah. That basically like blows that whole thread open. Like I talked earlier about how there are basically two main threads like in parallel, and they're very hard to intentionally so hard to figure out what the two threads are and how to separate them early on. And like,
yeah, because initially I thought
go ahead.
Initially I thought there was, just one conspiracy, and there might be multiple people involved, but I thought there was only one plot. And like, I guess this was another revelatory thing, is at some point realizing like, oh, they were coincidentally completely unrelated two conspiracy murder plots going on at the same time, and like they happened to bump against each other in odd ways that like made it early on hard to tease out that there were two. But I think if you realize,
which is fun. It's fun for a murder mystery to take that. Like, it's so coincidental and so silly, but like it made it. That was where like the like problem solving on the player part sort of started to come together for me. Was that revelation, and that was probably the biggest moment for me, where like the whole time I'm like, how do these things fit together? This piece and that piece just don't seem connected in any way, but they're both clearly here and important, and I can't reconcile that. And like, at some point you have that light bulb go off where you're just like, there are two murder plots.
And I think that's probably the main way, where if you had like a limited set of information, like I could totally see someone like feeling like they have it solved and have one of the plots solved and not the other. And genuinely feel like they have the mystery fully solved.
Yes, definitely. And the game does the like very predictable scapegoat character, which is Henry Division. Like, so at the very beginning, they just like dump a bunch of evidence on top of Henry Division, and they're just like, he did it. And most of the characters in the game are just like super annoyed that you're even investigating it. Like, it's clearly Henry Division. You should just execute him and we can move on with our lives. And like, anybody who has ever read or seen a mystery before is like, that dude did not do this.
That's going to be a great jumping off point for the characters. But before we get into Henry Division, who I think is fascinating, are there any other kind of surprise moments in your investigation that you want to call out, or should we just go right into Mr. Division?
No, I think we can just do it. I can't think of anything else big.
I mean, there were definitely other minor things, like when you like going to that whatever ziggurat out in the ocean and actually communicating with one of the gods was weird.
Communicating with a god is a big one, and then like getting into the or realizing that I needed to get into the marshal's barracks, which is Akiko's military group. So Akiko's the general, and like the first time you talk to her, it's just like, this woman is up to no good. I gotta.
She's so abrasive in her.
She literally, like, half of her lines of dialogue are just like her like saying, "I'll kill you." Like she's just so out there in terms of how violent and aggressive and mean she is to Lady Love Dies.
I think the other area that I'll shout out is I forget what it's called, but it's like on the eastern side of the island. It's like some demonic dumping ground for like weird stuff. So like that's where you find Henry Division's old apartment, but it's like some, it's like some quarantine trash zone where they like, and it's like super secured. It's like this like you throw all this corrupted stuff in there to keep it away and keep it hidden.
It's literally like it's like they constructed like a huge cement like housing over top of part of the city because of a demonic corruption. It's like they're trying to stop a radiation leak by like drowning the reactor in cement. Like they just like put this giant cement box over top part of the city because there was a demonic possession that happened there 20 years ago or something.
Yeah. And there are two ways to get in there. One, you can get in with some codes that require most, if not all, of the Starlight upgrade. Yep. But then there's also a secret tunnel from Sam's bar into there, which leads into one of the two major threads. Which I actually found it that way, which you can get in much earlier that way.
I did not find it that way, which is interesting.
Yeah, so I found that earlier, and I was like, "What are you up to here, Sam? Why do you have this tunnel in your bar?"
Well, that leads to that same conclusion for me. Like, I went in the front door by hacking the door. I was like, well, this place is real weird, and like, found all these like hidden experiments about demonology and stuff going on in there, and then happened to find the other exit while I was inside, and popped out in Sam's bar and was just like, Sam.
Yeah. What are you doing, Sam?
What's with this?
Yeah. I think the exploration does a really good job with those kind of connections. It's like, oh, you discovered this because that connects the world design with the fact that there is a tunnel from Sam's bar to this corrupted zone is both a traversal mechanical thing, but also
it gives multiple options to find it at different points of the game.
Yeah, but then it's also itself a piece of evidence because it's shows that Sam is up to something.
It actually matters because it's this very clearly intentionally constructed secret entrance to this quarantine zone. And that matters to the case. I think that's super smart.
Yeah, and I think those are the moments where the game was at its best for me. Is like when you had that melding of the open world and the shining light on evidence and motivations and stuff. And I think there are a handful of moments like that. Like I think finding the secret corridors is obviously one of those. And then that corrupted zone, but there's a handful of other ones as well. I also like the interactions with Crimson Acid, where you could spend the blood crystals to like get information because she's basically an information broker. Like that's kind of her role on the island. But let's go ahead and turn our gaze to Mr. Henry Division.
Henry Division.
Yeah. Like you said, nobody is going to suspect at all that he is actually the culprit here. Because they try and make it so obvious. But then it does create this like really antagonistic stance between everyone else who they unveil so much evidence that just seems so obvious that Henry Division is obviously the murderer. And then everyone else is just buying into it, or at least presenting that they're buying into that evidence. Like you mentioned, they're like antagonistic towards you, or even bothering to investigate. It's like, come on, it's clearly Henry Division.
Yeah, like have you even looked at this guy? He's clearly possessed by a demon.
Yeah, which he is. Is he the only character in the game who himself is not one of these like Syndicate demigod members or a demon?
Yeah, I think he's the only character who's just a mortal person. Yeah.
I mean, I guess he's not normal in the sense that he has been possessed by a demon, but when he was born, he was just a normal human being.
He was just a human. He was just a guy. And then you I mean, the story of Hindivision is exceptionally tragic in a lot of ways.
He is a very tragic figure.
But also, like, just like everyone else on the island who's just like, just convict him and get it over with. Like, you know what happened. Like, you talk to him and he's just like complete jerk to you. And it's like, you probably should just go ahead and execute me. Like, I don't, I don't care.
I think he's so interesting because, I mean, and this ties into a lot of the game's bigger themes, I think, is like all the other characters who are complicit or, did knowingly, participated in this murder scheme. Like, they have, crafted the scheme that makes Henry Division look very obvious, and they just want to, base it off that. And Henry Division has had such a tragic life that he makes for a very good scapegoat, both because it's easy to pin it on him, but also because he himself has just been through so much stuff that, like, he himself will believe it. Like, the way the demon has possessed him, like, it does make him do things that he doesn't remember all the time. And like, it's almost like the architects of the island have built him up over years and decades of, like, kind of setting this up as a long-term plan, and have scapegoated on him multiple times before. So, like, as you do your investigation, you find out, like Henry Division's past is a very important part of your investigation, because particularly Akiko and Carmelina have been very invested in Henry Division for a long time. So, like, you learn that seeds have been planted around Henry for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that plot, which is primarily led by Carmelina and Akiko, is basically Henry's whole life in the making. Like, you basically learn that they were essentially behind his demonic possession to begin with, the murder of his mother, and basically setting him on this path to then be able to scapegoat him on the murder of the Syndicate leadership, which is just, like I said, these are all terrible, terrible people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they've been working on this for a long time, which I guess, so this is the quote unquote 25th island. So, and they call it perfect. They reference it as like perfect 25.
This is the 24th. 25 is the next one.
Oh, 25 is the next one. Okay. So this is the 24th island. But yeah, and this ties into the whole power struggle, and, Carmelina and company, I guess, have been displeased with the actual council for a long time. So, they start making all these moves. But and
I don't remember. Henry Division is very interesting and very tragic. I don't remember specifically why Akiko and Carmelina and Yuri was the other co-conspirator, Yuri Knight, on this plot. I don't specifically remember why they wanted to overthrow the council, the Syndicate leadership, if it was just a power grab, or if they had some other motive.
I feel like this one was primarily a power grab by Carmelina.
I think that's what.
I think that's right. If I remember correctly, there was some history with Carmelina's dad had some tussles with the council where he got banned for some reason, which means the Silence family had been prohibited from ever holding a position on the council because of her father's actions. Yeah, and there's definitely a vendetta there. Yeah, so she was clearly bitter about that. So there's maybe some revenge in it for her as well. But I think also just her character.
Akiko wanted her position to change too, as sort of the general of the military of this group. So I think it probably boils down to mostly a power grab.
Yeah, and I think Yuri also had some vendetta against the council. I think a lot of the characters in that particular conspiracy, like I think all of them had reasons to not like the council and want them gone. And like as you're uncovering evidence, like that's part of what stood out to me is like, oh, all of these characters just hate the council. Like,
and I think this is a really interesting part of where the threads start to diverge for me. At least how I experienced it is like the one conspiracy led by Carmelina and Akiko, and with help from Yuri, and is scapegoating Henry Division, and I think they like set you up to guess suspect those three pretty early from conversations with them, because they're like the three most. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I suspected Akiko like immediately.
Yeah, they're like the three most antagonistic towards you as the investigator from the jump, and like all three of them just do not like Lady Love Dies, and like just want you to end your investigation, go ahead and execute Henry Division, move on, like and they're just personally mean to you the whole time. But I also think that's like of the two main conspiracy threads, which we'll get to the other one, I guess. It's the more complex one that has like more to find in it. So like for me, there was this lingering thing of like, these three characters seem up to no good. They seem bad. They seem like people I should be suspecting, and I do, and I have some random evidence here and there that doesn't seem to tie to the rest of what I'm finding. But like until you find that secret passageway system that we talked about earlier with Dinah Nagate, like it doesn't come together until you find that.
Yeah, because there was this whole bit of that conspiracy, or I'm pretty sure this was tied with that conspiracy. The whole, what were they? The SEALs. There was like this 4-layer like defense system to like protect the council that you had to get through basically like 4 different challenges to get access. And am I correct in saying that was the conspiracy that was, trying to systematically get through all 4 of those, or was that the other one?
I mean, they all were trying to bypass them in different ways. So yeah, they all did manage to bypass them in different ways. But the ones that are most clear, like, oh, these people were getting through the SEALs, is that Carmelina conspiracy. So like you're finding evidence that they got through the SEALs, but all the evidence about the murder scene points to the other threat. So it's like gets this really weird mix that works really, really well for that like early investigation period where you're just like, this doesn't make sense. What is going on?
Yeah. And then Carmelina's secret doors like kind of circumvent, because I guess what I was getting at is like the way they had been using Henry Division so much is like he was kind of set up to go through those, like they kind of engineered him to be able to go through those barriers, but like he didn't actually get that far from what I remember, like because the person who actually got into the chamber was, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Daganate.
Yeah, I think it's Dinah Nagate.
Yeah, that sounds right. And he was Carmelina's like son or something? Like he was related to Carmelina.
Yeah.
So he's also another
son.
Yeah, he's also a very tragic figure because he basically lived in this like secret room inside the mountain like his entire life, and he was hidden away. Nobody knew about him. And Carmelina, who is the architect of the island, creates everything. Was able to create this room for him, and then have that room connected via these secret passageways to basically lead right into the council chamber. So she clearly engineered this from the creation of the island. So it's like all of the other, it almost makes it feel like all of the stuff with Henry Division was set up purely to be a diversion, and Carmelina probably knew that the ultimate way the council was going to die was from Daganate, and getting, I'm sure I butchered that again, but like him getting into the room, just like the secret passage.
Yeah, Carmelina is like the ultimate like long-term conspiracy planning manipulator, just all around piece of garbage. Like her son lives his whole life, and he seems like a young adult when you meet him. In secret, hidden in tunnels under the island. He learned how to use, apparently being the architect is partially genetic, so he's learned how to be able to create secret passageways because Carmelina is his mom. Because so sure. And he literally takes part in this council murder and gets shot by the leader of the Syndicate.
Yeah.
And you find him just bleeding out in a cave.
Yeah.
And Carmelina is just up in her golden tower oh, I don't know, it was probably Henry. Your son is dying in a cave.
Yeah, and I think when you present that to her, she's just I don't know who that is. I
don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she is your classic has all the power, is trying to get more power, and has used the power she has to just totally obfuscate everything. Just smoke and mirrors everywhere, just completely lying in a way that is trying to make truth and lies indistinguishable. Just all of those classic bad leader tricks that she is clearly. And then I assume so. Yeah, the characters and main characters of that plotline. Carmelina is the architect. Akiko is the head of the military, and Yuri is he's a boat. He's who escorts people to the new islands, or is that Lydia?
That's Lydia.
Yeah, so I don't actually know what Yuri's role is on the island.
I'm not sure what his job was, but see if I can find something real quick. But he was
to architect Carmelina and the fairy woman's handler. So I mean,
that's right.
Yeah, I mean he's clearly very close to Carmelina, but he does have some role, I think, with Lydia of.
Yes, he's her boss. He's Lydia's boss. That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, my tell me if you think there's more to this, but my understanding that Yuri and Akiko basically join on with Carmelina because they don't like the council as is, and they would rather see Carmelina in power. And if they help her get into power, she'll show them favor, basically. So it's all those typical power play things of oh, if we're the ones loyal to you and you get power, then we also get power.
Yeah, Yuri to me came across very quickly as the classic young, ambitious will do whatever it takes to rise in the ranks. I think he was one of the characters that was newer to the Syndicate and hadn't met Lady Love Dies before. He was fresh on the scene and wanted to gain power. And they even talk about him as before he was just a normal or not great looking guy, and went and got a blessing from one of the gods, which is kind of heresy in this world.
Yeah, it's kind of looked at as taboo. You're not supposed to do that. And they basically talk about it because he's shirtless, right? Or has
he's jacked, dude. He's he's super super handsome. Six-pack abs, gleaming smile. He's the he transformed his body to try to make himself more, I guess more politically viable, and is just on a warpath to gain whatever power and prestige he can get as quickly as possible. And I think that's the ultimately why he ends up on this conspiracy.
Yeah, and the council shuts him down. I forget why, but the council shuts him down, and he very much does not like it because, like you said, he just wants to rise quickly. And like talking about him, like becoming just like this perfectly beautiful person, like basically overnight, like kind of feeds into there ends up like as you're talking to all the characters, you get a lot of characters basically accusing each other to you. It's like they're all kind of resistant to this at first because they all just want you to accuse Henry Division and move on. But like as you start poking deeper, every character like has something against some other character. And like a lot of people don't like Yuri because they're like, man, he got real good looking real quick. Something's up with that dude.
My man woke up one day and he was super hot. I don't know.
Yeah. So like a lot of characters have beef with Yuri because of that. Because I mean, they all basically say like he probably consorted with some god, which he's not supposed to do. I think Witness in particular does not like that.
Yeah, which we didn't say earlier, but the reason Lady Love Dies, the investigator, your character, was exiled was because she got, I don't remember the exact word, she got tempted or misled or somehow influenced by a god, and that was why she was exiled. So like it's kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal, yeah. And of course Yuri denies it because that's what you do. But yeah, I found that whole conspiracy super interesting, and like I don't know. I think the game also does a good job of just like, I mean, it's not hard to draw parallels with these characters' actions, like between their actions and, you know, real world parallels. So like, I think they do a pretty good job of like within this super weird, fantastical world of like presenting like dangerous character motivations that absolutely are realistic, if that makes sense.
No, totally. It's people who are fundamentally power hungry or unhappy with their station in life and will do anything to enact their will. Which is unfortunately something that happens in the real world in political structures.
Yep. Including around the time of this game's release. But I mean that kind of stuff's happened all throughout history as well. So like I think they like it's I don't know. I think I guess all of that to say is like I think they did a like I tend to find the most interesting or some of my favorite video game stories are ones that like just execute melding a interesting story with game mechanics and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But then, you know, also are in the way that good art is relatable back to the real world.
Sure.
So, and I don't know, I feel like they accomplished that, especially with this conspiracy.
Absolutely. I think that it has real world parallels. I think that this mystery uncovering it over time is super well paced. Like there are multiple points of entry to all the major points of it, and like you get those big revelations throughout of each of these characters has stuff to uncover that kind of cracks the next level of the case wide open, and then you get that final sort of like coup de grace of finding Dina Nagate and the secret tunnels, and it's just like, okay, this is how it happened, and this is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild, and you just kind of see how deep and how long that conspiracy has been orchestrated for.
Yeah, and all the unveiling of stuff with Henry Division and his backstory is so upsetting.
I think Henry Division might be my favorite character in the game, just because of how like as you just learn more about him, and it's like he's just so central to that whole conspiracy and how deep it goes and how tragic of a figure he is,
and like also not central at all to anything, and like his existence didn't matter except
he's just being used this whole time
to grant cover. Like it's so messed up. And then
it
when
is.
if you finally clear him at the end, I know we're jumping ahead here, but when you finally
Yeah, yeah.
do the court case and get everyone else executed except him, he's just like, man, you really came through for me, huh? and I'm just like, Henry.
Yeah. Well, because he's so clearly he's just been through so much shit his entire life, and when you talk to him, he has been. I mean, again, this is what happens when people with power have abused you for so long. Is you stop thinking that anything good is possible, and that's
And he
clearly where
literally
Henry.
and he literally thinks of himself as a villain and presents himself as an antagonistic, villainous figure. He doesn't really know if he did the murder or not, but he's like, yeah, that makes sense. I probably did.
Yeah, I mean, he has been mentally and emotionally abused so much that he's complete and pretty unknowingly just very manipulated, and he's basically saying what what everyone else wants him to say, and he's basically yeah, I probably did it, I don't know, that makes sense, and he's also just a jerk
go ahead
to you
and
because
execute me, I guess.
Yeah, and he's also a jerk to you because everyone's been a jerk to him, that's just
right.
how he's
it's
and
awful.
Yeah. And we haven't talked as much about Akiko, and we don't necessarily need to, other than to say she sucks a lot.
She sucks, yeah.
So, yeah, we should probably move on to the other conspiracy, which is in some ways more interesting because, this, I mean, well, I don't know, they're both really interesting. The Carmelina one is interesting because everyone involved is a complete terrible scumbag.
Yeah.
But their conspiracy runs so deep and for so long, and it's so well planned. Whereas
so calculated,
the other
and the other one is I don't know, let's drop a box in their room, I guess.
Yeah, the other one is this hastily scrapped together crackpot idea that Witness comes up with, and he kind of unwittingly gets other people roped into it, and it's very
it's so funny.
Yeah, so Witness, I guess we should probably start off describing the characters also. Witness to the end is I guess he's kind of the religious leader of the island. Is that how you would describe his role?
He's at least a religious zealot. I don't know if he's any sort of leader, but yeah, he literally can't go a sentence without talking about the gods or divine justice, or he's very flowery language. He likes to extend his arms to the sky as he preaches to you about nonsense. Yeah. That is definitely him.
Yeah, he's a hilarious character. I mean, first of all, his name being literally quote unquote the witness to the end, I think is just a ridiculous name.
Which is because he's always the last one to leave the island when it fails. So he always is the last one to witness the end of paradise.
Yeah. And I guess maybe that's also part of his role, is he oversees the end of the islands. And I guess he just makes sure everything goes well there. And I guess he has a religious component of seeing people to their death, whatever is involved there. I don't know.
Yeah. It's not really clear what his role as a priest is, but get that sort of vibe from him for sure.
Yeah, and my understanding, so I mean, Carmelina was basically the one heading up the other conspiracy, and he's pretty much heading up this one. And correct me if I'm misremembering anything, or if you had a different understanding, but my understanding is he is such a religious zealot and he feels very strongly that everyone in charge has strayed from their true purpose of serving the gods, that he basically thinks everyone's a heretic and needs to die, and we need to start fresh.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little less apocalyptic than that. I think he's just done with the council specifically. He thinks that my impression was that he had gotten fed up with them because they had gotten more involved and more interested in the creating paradise aspect of their mission rather than the reviving of the gods aspect of their mission. So like he was like, whatever, let's just like work with what we've got and not worry about it and focus on bringing the gods back. Whereas he felt like the council was more interested in creating, the perfect paradise, which had not gone well. Yeah, and Carmelina as well. He would definitely not have been a friend of Carmelina, is my understanding. So yeah, he basically is just like, we're gonna burn this system down of turning through islands because it's a waste of time, and we need to get back to our real purpose of reviving the gods.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And by having these two plot lines that are kind of like, Witness and Carmelina don't really like each other, that does allow for a lot of something I said earlier, like different characters having beef with others and like can kind of cast suspicion.
It works so well.
Yeah. But I guess
his main co-conspirators were the Daybreak family.
Yeah, so
they're great.
Yeah, they're great characters. They're maybe some of the only ones that you can't say are outright evil. I don't know. They're more in the gray area, I guess. But yeah, you have Lydia Daybreak, who is, how would you describe her? She is the fairy woman who
is the fairy woman. Yeah.
Yeah, she's transporting people from one island to the next whenever you're moving islands. And then she's married to Sam Daybreak, who is a red skeleton man.
He's a cool red skeleton man who runs a bar.
Yeah, who runs a bar. I guess that's his only role, is he just runs the bar.
I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't know.
You're a red. I don't even remember how he became Red Skeleton Man. I remember they describe it at some point, but
they were.
Yeah,
both
I guess when you're
both assassins in their formal. I think they were both mortals. I could be wrong about that. I got the sense that they were both mortals and they were assassins on Earth, in the real world, in the mortal world, and like worked their way up the power ladder as like super highly skilled assassins, and then became part of the Syndicate at some point. Not 100% sure if that's accurate, but that was the vibe I got.
Yeah. All the characters have more history to them. Like, I think Akiko was like, she rose to power through some war with demons or something. And like, all of these characters have backstory.
Yeah. I think I think the end of their assassin story is that they ended up fighting each other and then falling in love. And like,
right.
I think Lydia like kills him, but then he becomes a skeleton and is immortal. I don't know. There was something there with like a tragic love story, and then they end up becoming immortal Syndicate members on Paradise Island. It's a whole thing.
Oh, I love this. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but I love this game's just adherence to its ridiculous bullshit that it comes up with. It's
great. I love all of it.
Yeah, you just have those kind of stories. Like, everything that you just said about them is ridiculous, and I love it. But yeah, I feel like Witness is the engineer of this story, and I feel like he kind of ropes Sam and Lydia in a way where like my understanding is that Sam and Lydia basically want out. Like, they just don't want to be involved with all of this island creation stuff anymore. They just want to be on their own. And from what I remember, Witness is basically like, hey, if you do this job for me, I'll get you out.
Yeah, that's 100% what I thought. They are people who got wrapped up into this Syndicate business, probably not really understanding what it was, and then they're just like, no, this isn't for us. We want to go live our lives together,
normal lives. Yeah. So he where I think they operate in a gray area of being, culpable is they didn't really want to kill the council like everyone else did.
I don't even know if it's clear that they knew that their actions were going to lead to that.
Yeah, from what I remember, I don't think it was clear to them. I don't think they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I think they were literally just like doing some tasks that the witness asked them to do in secret that were probably sketchy. They were definitely sketchy.
Yeah.
But they didn't really know what they were doing.
Yeah, and that's where you can assign blame to them, is they were agreeing to these very sketchy things without kind of thinking too deeply about what they were doing and that it could be bad. So like they kind of went along with stuff without questioning it. That probably should have was apparent that it was worth questioning.
Yeah. Should we just go ahead and say what this assassination plot was?
Please do. I think now's the time. Because it's great.
This assassination plot on the council of the Immortal Syndicate of Paradise was that Lydia was going to drive her car onto the top of their building where they meet and drill a hole in the top, or like break open a grate on top of the building, and then take this very large box and place it in the council chambers and leave it there. Inside of this box, interestingly enough, is a murderous demon that was captured at some point in the past and sedated, that would jump out and murder the council on command from some remote device.
Yeah, it's the most like Mission Impossible, like, just scrappy, we're gonna like string together these weird devices and scenarios and like, sneak our way into this high-tech thing to plant a demon there.
Yeah.
And Sam was involved somehow in getting the demon because Sam had access to the corruption zone.
Yeah, Sam had access to the corruption zone. Lydia had the ability to access the top of the building, and she was an assassin, so like she broke in and killed some of the marshals that were guarding. No, she didn't actually. That was a whole different plot that was resolved. Those marshals weren't killed by. She was going to kill them, but then they were already dead.
They were already
dead.
Yeah, who actually killed them? Because it wasn't Henry.
It was Akiko.
Was it Akiko? Yeah, she just killed them. Yeah.
She broke released two people from her prison that were not marshals, dressed them up as marshals and murdered them and left them at the scene so that the marshal that she was having a illicit relationship with could get away.
Yeah, because her lover was one of the original guard. Right.
And she knew that whoever was there was going to have to get killed, so she ended up planting bodies, basically.
Yeah,
the whole
we're
thing.
We're in the summaries we're giving, we're skirting over so many of these details.
Yeah, there's so many details.
So interesting.
The end result is that the council all goes into their council chambers, and there's a big box there with a demon in it. And at the same time, Carmelina Silence's secret child enters with a knife, and the demon and Dinah Nagate both attack the council at the same time.
Yeah. And both the demon and Daigen Nate get shot by the lead guy's gun.
So there ends up being this kind of confusing mess of different blood splatters and different firings of the gun, and there's a dead demon in there, but not everybody was killed by the demon.
Yeah.
And so, that's where the threads get really intertwined when you first inspect that crime scene, and you're just like, this is a mess, and I cannot tell A from B here.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically a three-way brawl where everyone died. Yeah, and I hadn't quite put together the killer demon part at that point when I went into the room. So it was just like, wait, what? There's a demon involved?
Yeah, there's just a demon laying there on the floor dead.
Yeah, it's wild. So that the whole witness thing is just hilarious to me. Like in some ways it's not as sinister to me as the Carmelina one, because there's just so much scheming and planning and
Right.
like just mistreatment of others. Like I think Witness's plot was a little more targeted in that like he was really only going to harm the council and maybe some guards, which I mean is bad. Like he was still a bad person, but like Carmelina's thing like ruined so many lives. Like
the Witness is obviously crazy and like obviously conspiracy theory to murder, like not great, but there's a difference of scale in like the just cold, calculated brutality and manipulation of Carmelina's plot versus the Witness is just like, I don't know, I'm going to convince these people who just want a better life to do a job for me that's going to result in some people dying.
Yeah, I mean, that's still an evil plot. But yeah, it's not quite as far-reaching and as cold calculated. It's almost kind of comical in some ways. But I think the tragic ones of his story are Lydia and Sam, because they just wanted out and kind of got manipulated in a way. Like they probably didn't do their due diligence and let themselves be manipulated to an extent, but they were. I don't think they were necessarily bad people.
It's hard to say because it feels like everybody in the Syndicate is like automatically a bad person to me. So it's like, I don't know, maybe they're fine, but like they clearly have not great judgment, at least.
Yeah. Oh, that is unquestionable. That their judgment left something to be desired.
But I will say that, go ahead.
Oh, did you have something to say about that line?
I was going to talk about the like ultimate resolution here, but
okay. Yeah, so I was going to say before we move on, I feel like the last real thing to talk about is kind of that final trial and resolution. Before that, is there anything else? Because there are some characters that aren't really super tied up in those plot lines. Like, do we want to say any words about Dr. Doomjazz or One Last Kiss or any of those characters, or give a shout out to your boy Shinji?
I mean, Shinji's great. He's a demon that exists on the island, but is like basically like hanging on to his last leg of life because he isn't supposed to be there and like doesn't have the energy to actually do anything. But he just like pops up all over the place and says something really cryptic or silly or just like cracks a joke and then laughs and explodes and then appears later.
And
he's great.
I mean, some of the stuff he says is like, I don't know. He's like really trying to drop some wisdom bombs or something. Like he's like, he has these observations about humanity and like,
he'll try to like wax poetic or like make some philosophical point and then be like, I don't know, you all kind of suck, so whatever, and then laugh and explode.
I feel like a lot of his things kind of just end with like, humanity's going to screw it up somehow. The other funny part about him to me is like everyone knows he's on the island, but then they're like, he's harmless. Like he's completely,
he can't do anything.
Because like any other time, like a demon comes up, like everyone gets so up in arms. Like they're so on top of like containing and removing any demonic presence. But Shinji is the one demon where they're like, oh, he's such a weakling demon that like we're just gonna let him do his thing.
He's great. I love Shinji.
And he's always flipping the birds.
He's got his forearms. Just constantly double birds in the air. Man.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to say
there
about
are a couple of other characters, but like Doomjazz is fine. He provides some evidence, but like I don't think I was particularly attached to him as a character.
I think he's probably one of the least important characters in my mind in this game. Like he's kind of one of just the most neutral characters. He doesn't really have a big part in the story.
Yeah.
You can maybe say the same about Crimson Acid to a degree. I mean, she's an information broker, so you actually do get some good evidence from her. But in terms of her actual participation in the story, like she is more of an observer who gathers information.
Yeah, I think that's true.
One Last Kiss is she pops up at the end and kind of has a lot of story.
She's kind of interesting.
Yeah. But I don't know that I have
basically
a lot.
The ghost of a murdered Syndicate member from past. So that her story and how she was murdered and all that kind of plays in. The fact that she's a ghost and like doesn't seem to have perfect memory or like necessarily understand. She has answers. She just doesn't decides she's just not going to give you because she wants to be a cryptic ghost. Wants you to figure it out. But then there are other things where like she literally just doesn't know the answer to, and she's kind of like an interesting character to like play a little bit with. Lady Love Dies as the investigator. I see her role as kind of like like trying to throw you some curveballs and like make you question things as you get towards the late part of the game. But like those 4 groups of conspirators that we've already talked about are the focus of the game for me.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it's time to like just talk about the wrap up and the final trial. So I mean, I'm guessing you and I have had similar trials because
it seems like it.
Found pretty much all the evidence.
And mechanically, the way the trial works out is like they'll go through different crimes or questions, and you accuse someone, and like put forth all the evidence you've gathered towards that person for that particular action. And then if judge says, yeah, that sounds good, then you shoot them.
Which all the shooting happens at the end, right? Because like
yes, it does.
You can accuse the same person multiple times. Like
I think you can convict somebody of multiple things.
Yeah, like I think I accused Carmelina of multiple things, for example.
Yeah. And then it goes through a sequence at the end where you're just murdering people. Very stylishly, I guess. But I mean, maybe Lady Love Dies is not actually a great person either.
Oh no, I don't think she is. Yeah, I mean, to your point earlier, I don't think anyone on this island is good.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Like you at best have a couple gray neutrals, maybe, but it's a very harsh, like it's a very binary punishment. It's like if you were complicit in any way with what was going on, you get executed.
You get shot.
So like Sam and Lydia Daybreak, for example, like they just got shot. Even even if you could argue that they didn't have as big or important a role of creating and executing the plan as like Witness did, for example. But it's like if you're involved in any way, you're gone.
Yeah, it's a very harsh judicial system on Paradise. And that's what I was going to say earlier is like, I think if I redid the trial with the knowledge that I have now of exactly how it mechanically works, I might try to engineer a way to spare Lydia and Sam. Like me as the player, as a human person with empathy, might be like, you know what? They should probably be allowed to walk away from this because they don't seem like the worst people here. But like Lady Love Dies, just if you just like click through everything with like, okay, this is the person I have the most evidence for on this case, so I'm just going to put it all out there, then like all those people are getting shot.
Yeah, for sure. And I did get the impression that like even if you found everything, there are multiple evidence pieces for the different crimes you're presenting. So I think even if you have everything, you could construct different versions of the truth, quote unquote. So like I think there are ways. I feel pretty confident in saying there are ways you could get different outcomes, whether you could spare Sam and Lydia while still piecing together that full conspiracy. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
that's the real question, I think.
Yeah, there are definitely different outcomes you get. And I mean, that's one of the interesting things of the game is that you do get to construct your version of the truth.
Yes.
And, if you find everything, like I felt like it kind of presented itself in a way. Like
Yeah.
I felt like the trial was actually fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it was for me.
Yeah. The funniest part of the trial by far is...
I already know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious if you've done the trial, but all these characters get listed in your log as like potential suspects, and like at the end of the trial, it wraps up and it goes through all of them one by one, and it says what the result of all of these characters' fates
So
is.
it's like Carmelina Silence found guilty of conspiracy and whatever else, like demonic possession of Henry and murder of Henry's mother, and like whatever you've convicted her of.
Yeah.
And it goes through all the characters.
Yep. And one of the suspects that gets put into your log is the killer demon that you found in the box in the council room. And it's literally just as killer demon. And you as it's going through there, it just has killer demon mixed in with all the other characters, but there's no I mean, I'm sure you can accuse the killer demon, but I didn't when I was doing it because I just accused the other characters. Mm-hmm. So killer demon went free.
Killer demon's fully cleared. Yeah, because it's dead, so it doesn't matter.
It's dead, yeah. It's already dead.
But yes, it gets 100% cleared of any wrongdoing in the process of this trial.
Yeah, so I took a screenshot of this and I just found it, and it says dead killer demon, convictions, no crimes, verdict, release.
Release that dead killer demon.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
So, yeah, it's so silly. But yeah, it's yeah, I just shared that picture with Nate. I like it because they like fully stick by their whole setup and like investigation structure, even through dumb stuff like that.
Yeah. It feels like they are 100% willing to laugh at themselves for this ridiculous scenario that they have constructed. And it just feels good.
Yeah. I'm sure the devs had a good laugh at that. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much covers, I don't know if there's much else you want to talk about. I will say, like, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I did also really enjoy just the game's style, like the art style and the soundtrack. I really like the soundtrack, actually.
It's great.
Just this funky jazz while you're investigating. And yeah, I really enjoyed my time with the game overall. Like, some of the movement stuff is clunky, and maybe some of the world navigation, as we kind of touched on early on, like could have been presented more clearly or a little less clunky, or some of that stuff. But like once it actually got to around into the weeds of unraveling the mystery and learning these characters and all their backstory and how all their motivations and relationships intertwined, and just piecing all that together in this bizarre mythos of this world, like I feel like they just did a really good job of like creating this fictional world that also has like real world artistic merits, as we talked about, and like it was fun to explore, and like kind of melding the investigation part with the actual story. And it was just, I found a really fascinating game to engage with kind of from start to finish. Like there's just a lot of neat stuff, and they like really leaned into it and like just embraced everything they were doing. And like it's, I don't know, it's really neat, and I think just a very unique game as well, like both in terms of being an open world detective game. Like I can't really think of any other game I've played that's similar mechanically, but then also they've created a very unique, like its whole narrative, I think, is also very unique. Like, I can't really think of much else like that either. So I don't know. It was a really fascinating game, I think, from top to bottom. Like, even if it has some little quirks here and there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on real quick, or any closing thoughts you have, or.
No, I don't think so. I think that was a good overview. It's a very unique and cool game. Echo what you already said.
Yeah, it's a fun one. Well, if you have no more closing thoughts, then we will wrap this up and call this a podcast. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed listening to us talk all sorts of stuff about Paradise Killer. I have been Flex, joined by Nate. This has been another episode of the ATACS podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.